Hi everyone, welcome. I'm down here at my wormery, and the system that I'd like to check in on today is the worm system that's now 100 days of age. It's my so-called mixed population of worms. They live in my Vermibag tote, which sits right there in the middle, propped up on that upside down bin over there, just to help it squeeze in alongside its two neighboring bins. When we last checked in here 13 days ago, we gave it a pretty good size feeding. It was like a whole turnip in there, I believe it is, and there was grapes. I'm curious to see how those are coming along at this point. The rest of these things were like little shreds of carrot peels and things that are probably not going to have any leftovers, but I bet we'll find a few leftovers in here, and I don't know. If it seems sensible to do so, we'll give it its 11th feeding, but my main reason for checking in was just the fact that it's reached sort of a milestone age, and I was a little bit concerned just to make sure it's not drying out, because there are sections of the bag that do tend to ventilate a little bit and allow for the loss of some moisture. So we're going to get that thing up on the bench, see how it's coming along, add water if needed, add food if needed, add nothing if it's best to do so. So let's get to work. I'm starting out with nothing more than rolled up sleeves and gloves on. If it needs moisture, I'll add it. If it needs food, I'll add it, but I'm also prepared to add nothing, because I don't want to feel like I'm forcing anything on any of these systems. I'd like for them to really kind of progress organically and naturally without too much forced action. The only one section of the bin that has concerned me lately is the far edge, closer to me, where these two gaps are kind of open and allow for a little bit more airflow than anywhere else. Here, these two outer edges are pretty much resting up against the plastic, allowing for virtually no airflow. And up until we decided a couple weeks ago to do away with this zip top cover and just shove it in over here on this side, this has also been restricting airflow, allowing this side to remain pretty damp and cozy for the worms. But here we've been pretty regularly applying moisture, and we'll do so today if we find that it makes sense to do so. Let's just evict this little guy before we remove these coverings. See another little guy hanging out below. Moisture's doing pretty good in here because of that red plastic covering, but it's just the edges where you got to be a little bit more careful with a system like this that allows for a good amount of airflow and ventilation. I was watching another of the channels earlier today where they're using a different manufacturer's bag, probably made of a different material than this bag is made out of. And they reported having no issue with dryness, but then again, they might be running that system in a place that, you know, just for whatever reason has good moisture content in the air and doesn't result in systems drying out. Here in my basement, in my house in general, things get a little bit dry because of the forced hot air heating system that I've got. When I was a kid, I used to live in an apartment, and there we had these radiant heat radiators. So I think the moisture level was generally higher, more comfortable in that house, in that apartment, I guess, when I was a kid. But this house that I own now is heated with forced hot air, and I think just by its nature, it's constantly taking the air and heating it and sending the exhaust gases of that process, as well as a lot of the moisture that was in the air, out the chimney. I'm glad to see that the moisture's so far pretty nice, as we've typically found it to be out on this far edge here. This is the only section of the bin where things are sometimes a little bit dry, but I'm glad we went almost overboard on applying dampness to this edge last time proactively in anticipation of the drying that we knew would occur. Because even though there are a little bit of dry bits to it, for the most part it was still seemingly comfortable, and you could even see worms occupying the space very close to it, some of them appearing to even venture into it right on the very edges. So perhaps the very edge here was dry on the very surface. So I've attempted to blend most of that in down low. So whatever we end up covering with here at the end is probably going to be pretty nice and damp already just to look at it. But I believe we'll grab the spray bottle and once again proactively dampen this far edge of the bin that's like I mentioned earlier, getting a good amount of ventilation just because of this little tiny gap on the edge. And I think we'll have continued good luck along this edge as well. I think if we continue around, all the way around, we're going to see good moisture levels and worms hanging out, enjoying the space. Definitely what we're seeing down here. Here and there I'm finding good bits of bedding, leaves, paper, cardboard, good moisture level. Can't complain. But I don't want to allow myself to talk. I don't want to talk myself out of grabbing the spray bottle. I think that's one thing that almost happened last time. I believe I was almost talking myself out of dampening this far edge because we had actually mixed in a good bit of damp surrounding material, making it look good again. But it didn't remove that very present risk of drying because of the dry winter air in the house. So here too, I think here too we've been not observing drying anymore ever since we shoved the cover into that edge of the bin. Although now maybe I just didn't stuff it in quite as good as I could last time, but there's a little bit of drying going on in there. Perhaps just to play it safe, we'll go ahead and we'll spray a little bit of dampness in along both of those two longer edges where there's a little bit of airflow, a little bit more than we've got on these shorter edges here, as just a proactive measure to keep things in the system nice and comfortable. And I would have to assume that down the middle, which is where we fed last, there's probably a good sufficient amount of moisture, just based on the fact that it was a variety of different fruits and veggies that had been frozen, and just the very thawing process would probably result in a good amount of the moisture of those things being ejected, and then I would assume that just the further breakdown of the material would also result in moisture being emitted. So some of the things I'm picking up on here are just chunks of bedding, obviously. Things like this piece of paper or cardboard or whatever it was. The things I'm kind of looking for are maybe grapes that I always thought were sort of resistant to breakdown because of their little outer membrane, but who knows, maybe the worms got into them somehow and did away with them. But there was also an entire, here it is, okay. I was getting a little worried that I was just losing my mind. But this is a turnip that we threw in here 13 days ago, and it's definitely softening up, but it's not yet really showing any signs of infiltration. So that's something that they'll be able to work on, I believe, in time. But it's probably not enough yet, definitely not even now. It's not even something that the worms can... Yeah, at the present time, it looks like something that the worms probably can't even make much use of. Perhaps soon they'll be able to, and it's getting a little gooey. Oh, actually, maybe we've got a taker. Looks like he started making his way in there. So who knows? Maybe there's something going on here that I'm just not seeing, but I got a feeling very soon it's going to become a very popular thing. And as far as leftovers go, it's certainly not much, that's for sure. This looks like it could be the peel of something, maybe a little bit of apple. Yeah, I'm really surprised. They did a great job doing away with the stuff they received 13 days ago. All right, you know what? I'm on my way upstairs to the kitchen to get them a little something to continue feasting on here before they go hungry. And then we'll pick up where we left off when I get back. I have something special in mind for their 100th birthday. It's a good generous portion of kiwi, celery, and some peppers. I want to start though with bringing in some of these pieces of paper that were just sort of floating in here on top as sort of a top covering material, and include them as some of the bedding to go in underneath the foods that we're giving them. Let's actually open these up a little bit better, make them into a single layer rather than a double layer. It'll add to the overall effect of what my special idea was for these little guys. Alright, I'm being silly. But let's do it. What the heck, right? I thought it would look cool. I was going to begin with just a basic foundation of all the yummy foods that they're getting. Some of them. They're going to look so cool once they have all the softer portions of them nibbled away by the worms. They'll just have these strands, these fibers running across the entire bin once all the celery's been consumed. So that should leave a pretty cool effect for us when we come in here to check the next time. But what I wanted to use was these couple of bright colored peppers, as well as these 2 kiwis. And can you see what I've done there? It says 100, right? Nice. Alright, that's pretty silly. But yeah, it seemed to me like I had the makings to customize their feeding in such a way that it also commemorates their 100th day in service. So let's sprinkle it with a little bit of grit. Oh yeah, let's not forget to incorporate the leftovers here. I'd really like to see what happens to this, so I'd like to have it in the center. So what we'll do is we'll just spread things out in an even way. And I've seen kiwis last really long if there's no puncture to the outer skin. So I wonder if that might be the case with one of these kiwis here. I've had instances where the kiwi just lasted forever and ever, mainly because the worms just couldn't get at it or whatever. Maybe because the composting activity in general just couldn't get at the insides of it. So we'll see what becomes of it. Let's make sure we cover everything up here with material. I guess we'll use some of this stuff on the outer edges to cover up with too. We're covering up with plastic at the end anyway, so I think that we're protecting this bin from any sort of curious passerby creatures that might take an interest. But I just feel safer knowing that the foods that I'm giving them are thoroughly covered in general. We've also got those cardboard bits that we removed in the beginning, but before we start covering up here, I want to give the promised dampening of these far edges where we did find a little bit of dry material. But we're also benefiting from the ongoing accumulation of castings themselves throughout the bin, which also do a great job holding on to moisture. I'm sure at some point soon this won't be necessary anymore. We'll be able to just count on the fact that the plastic covering of the container sufficiently protects the evaporation from allowing it to get all the moisture sucked out of the system. So we did away with those couple coffee filters. What we were left with was just a couple pieces of cardboard as well as some newspaper bits. Maybe next go around we'll hang on to the cardboard and introduce the newspaper bits as bedding for the feeding. How does that sound? At least the stuff will get a little bit more attention than just sitting out here on the surface. You saw there was a nice bit of moisture recirculating underneath the covering, the plastic covering, which always draws a little bit of worm traffic. So the coverings also get a little bit of attention from the worms by being out here on the top, but certainly not as much as, you know, being down within the bedding and right next to the foods and stuff. So that's what we'll do with this stuff next time if we don't forget. All right, well, not much left to do here. Oh, looks like we had a little stowaway here. Could have just left him there too for that matter. Wouldn't have done any harm to let him just stay there. Whatever. He can find his way back if that's where he wants to be. So what do we got? That's everything, right? We're not covering up with the zip top container. We found that for some reason, little flying insects seem to take an interest in this place and camp out down here within this system when the zip top covering is closed. So I found that just by leaving it open, it seems to just do away with the problem entirely, which is cool. All right, everyone. That's it for today's check-in. I'll take care of getting things put away and cleaned up, but I'm not going to keep you around for that because that's boring. Before I go, though, let me really quickly say thank you. Thanks so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always really appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel, too. That's really appreciated as well. Everyone, have a great day. Thanks for watching.